The scorching sun beat down mercilessly as Rosalie Hammond stared in horror at the path ahead, a writhing mass of rattlesnakes blocking her only route to safety. Her heart pounded against her ribs, sweat trickling down her neck, despite the chill of fear that gripped her. The water in her canteen had run dry hours ago, and the distant silhouette of Aurora, Colorado seemed like a cruel mirage dangling just beyond this slithering barrier. "Don't move," a deep voice commanded from behind her. Rosalie froze, not daring to turn her head. The rattling intensified as several snakes sensed her presence, their diamond patterns blurring as they shifted against each other. "Step back," slowly. She obeyed, taking one careful step backward, then another, until she felt herself bump against something solid, the broad chest of a stranger. Only then did she risk turning to look. The man stood tall against the harsh backdrop of the Colorado prairie, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Dust coated his leather vest and denim pants, and a week's worth of stubble darkened his jaw. His eyes, striking blue against his sun-browned skin, assessed the situation with practiced calm. "Xavier Lawson," he said simply, tipping his hat. "Seems you've wandered into a nest." "Rosalie Hammond," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was trying to reach Aurora before nightfall." Xavier nodded once, then stepped around her, a long stick in one hand. With deliberate movements, he began clearing a path, using the stick to sweep snakes aside while his heavy boots stamped the ground, creating vibrations that sent many slithering away. "Been meaning to clear this nest for weeks," he muttered. "They're worse this year with the drought." Rosalie watched, transfixed, as he methodically created a safe corridor through the writhing mass. "You seem experienced with rattlers," she observed, clutching her small travel bag closer. "6 generations of Lawsons have ranched this land," he replied without looking back. "You learn to handle what tries to kill you." The way was nearly clear now. Xavier turned and extended his hand. "Step exactly where I step. Don't rush." Rosalie placed her trembling hand in his calloused one, feeling an unexpected jolt at the contact. His grip was firm but gentle as he guided her through the narrow path he'd created, the rattling a constant, nerve-wracking backdrop to their careful progress. When they finally reached the other side, Rosalie released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. I believe you just saved my life." He shrugged, but a hint of a smile softened his weathered features. "Xavier's fine, and anyone with sense would have done the same." He glanced at the lowering sun. "Aurora's still 3 miles out. My ranch is just over that ridge. You're welcome to rest there and continue your journey tomorrow." Rosalie hesitated. She'd been raised to be cautious, especially around men she didn't know. But the desert night would be dangerous, and the memory of those rattlers made her shudder. "I promise you'll be safe," Xavier added, reading her thoughts. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Finley, will be there." "Thank you," she decided. "That would be most appreciated." They walked in companionable silence, the vast landscape stretching around them. Occasionally, Xavier would point out landmarks or name plants that could provide water in emergencies. Rosalie found herself studying his profile when he wasn't looking: the straight nose, the determined set of his jaw, the way tiny lines crinkled at the corners of his eyes when he squinted against the sun. "What brings you to these parts?" he asked eventually. Rosalie smoothed her dusty skirt. "My father passed last winter. I've come to live with my aunt in Aurora and help with her millinery shop." "I'm sorry for your loss," Xavier said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "Your aunt would be Eleanor Hammond, I take it?" Rosalie looked up in surprise. "Yes, do you know her?" "Small territory," he explained. "Everyone knows Eleanor's hats, best in 3 counties." The sun was casting long shadows when they crested the ridge, revealing a neat ranch house nestled among cottonwoods. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and cattle dotted the pastures beyond. "It's beautiful," Rosalie said honestly. A hint of pride crossed Xavier's face. "It's home." As they approached, a plump woman with gray-streaked hair emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression shifted from curiosity to concern when she spotted Rosalie's disheveled state. "Xavier Lawson, who is this poor soul you've dragged through the desert?" she demanded. "Mrs. Finley, this is Miss Rosalie Hammond, Aliner's niece," Xavier explained. "She had a run-in with the rattler nest by Chalk Creek. She'll be staying the night." Mrs. Finley clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Those nasty things. Come in, dear, you must be parched. I've got dinner nearly ready and fresh water for washing up." The house was simple but comfortable, with solid wooden furniture and faded curtains that fluttered in the evening breeze. Rosalie gratefully accepted a basin of water and soap, washing away the dust of travel while Mrs. Finley chattered about local happenings. Over a hearty meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Rosalie found herself relaxing. Xavier spoke little, but his presence was oddly comforting. When he did contribute to the conversation, his observations were thoughtful and occasionally laced with dry humor that made her smile. Miss Hammond was on her way to help with her aunt's millinery business, Xavier told Mrs. Finley. The housekeeper brightened. "Oh, will you be making hats as well? I've always admired Aliner's work." "I've been apprenticing with my father since I was 16, Rosalie admitted. "He was a milliner in St. Louis. I hope my skills will be useful to my aunt." "I'm certain they will be," Xavier said. There was something in his tone that made Rosalie look up, catching an expression of admiration in his eyes before he glanced away. That night, lying in the guest room's comfortable bed, Rosalie found her thoughts returning to Xavier. There was something compelling about the quiet rancher, a steadiness that contrasted with the chaotic day she'd experienced. Sleep came easily, lulled by the distant lowing of cattle and the gentle rustle of cottonwood leaves. Morning brought the scent of coffee and bacon. Rosalie dressed quickly in her spare clothes and joined Xavier and Mrs. Finley in the kitchen. The rancher was already outfitted for the day's work, his hat resting on the table beside him. "I'll be taking Miss Hammond into Aurora after breakfast," he announced. "Got business with the mercantile anyway." Mrs. Finley nodded approvingly, setting a plate of eggs and bacon before Rosalie. "Eat up, dear. The journey may not be long, but you'll need your strength." Xavier's wagon was comfortable enough, with a padded seat and a canvas cover to shield them from the sun. Rosalie sat beside him, acutely aware of his proximity as he guided the team of horses toward town. "Thank you again for your kindness," she said as the ranch disappeared behind them. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along yesterday." Xavier kept his eyes on the trail. "Lucky timing. I don't usually patrol that section of my property in the afternoons." "Then I'm doubly fortunate," she replied. The conversation flowed more easily than the previous day. Xavier told her about his ranch, the challenges of the ongoing drought, and his hopes for expanding his herd if the rains returned. Rosalie shared stories of St. Louis, her father's shop, and her journey west by train and stage-coach. "Did you leave anyone behind?" Xavier asked suddenly, then looked as if he regretted the question. Rosalie smiled faintly. "No, no one special if that's what you're asking. My mother passed when I was young, and since father died, there's no one now except Aunt Aliner." Xavier nodded, a hint of something like relief crossing his features. "Your aunt's a good woman. Helped nurse my mother during her final illness." "I didn't know," Rosalie said softly. 8 years ago now." His hands tightened on the reins momentarily. "She'll be pleased to see you." Aurora appeared in the distance, a collection of wooden buildings straddling the banks of a creek, though small compared to St. Louis. The town seemed bustling enough, with horses tied outside the establishments and people moving along the boardwalks. Xavier guided the wagon to a neat two-story building with a sign reading Hammond's Millinery hanging above the door. A bell jingled as they entered, announcing their arrival. A slender woman with Rosalie's same chestnut hair, though threaded with silver, looked up from a workbench where she was attaching feathers to a fashionable hat. Her face lit with joy when she saw Rosalie. "My dear girl, you've arrived at last." Xavier Hammond rushed forward, embracing her niece warmly. "I expected you on yesterday's stage. I was beginning to worry." "She had some trouble on the trail," Xavier explained. "Rattlesnake nest by Chalk Creek." Xavier's hand flew to her mouth. "How dreadful! Are you all right?" "Thanks to Mr. Lawson," Rosalie assured her. "He cleared a path through the snakes and offered me shelter for the night when it was too late to reach town." Xavier clasped Xavier's hand gratefully. "Bless you, Xavier. I can't bear to think what might have happened." The rancher looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Just doing what needed doing, Miss Xavier." "Nonsense. You're a hero," Xavier declared. "And you must join us for dinner this Sunday to properly thank you." Xavier glanced at Rosalie, something unreadable in his expression. "That's kind of you, madam, but not necessary." "I insist," Xavier said firmly. 2 o'clock. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yes, madam." He tipped his hat to both women. "I'll leave you to get reacquainted. Need to see Mr. Peterson at the Mercantile." After he left, Xavier led Rosalie to the living quarters behind the shop. "Such a good man," she remarked. "Tragic about his father, though." "What happened?" Rosalie asked, setting down her bag in the cheerful bedroom Xavier had prepared for her. "Shot during a cattle dispute 4 years ago. Xavier took over the ranch at 22. He's done remarkably well, considering." Rosalie pictured Xavier's solemn face, understanding better the weight he seemed to carry. "He mentioned your kindness when his mother was ill." Xavier nodded sadly. "Consumption. A terrible thing to witness. But enough of sorrows. Tell me about your journey and your father's final days. Your letters were so brief." The next few days passed in a whirlwind as Rosalie settled into life in Aurora. The town was smaller than she was accustomed to, but the people were welcoming, and Xavier's shop kept them both busy. Rosalie discovered her aunt had built a respectable clientele, with women coming from neighboring settlements specifically for her designs. Rosalie found herself watching for Xavier whenever she was near the shop window, but saw no sign of him until Sunday arrived. He appeared precisely at 2 o'clock, dressed in clothes noticeably newer than his work attire, his hair still damp from washing. Xavier welcomed him warmly, ushering him into the small dining room where Rosalie was putting the finishing touches on the table. Their eyes met, and Rosalie felt a curious flutter in her chest at the way his gaze lingered on her. "Miss Hammond," he greeted, presenting a small bouquet of wildflowers. "These grow near the creek. Thought you might like them." "They're lovely," she said, genuinely touched. "Thank you, Xavier." Xavier bustled about, serving a roast with vegetables from her garden and fresh bread. The conversation flowed easily, with Xavier doing most of the talking, sharing town gossip and news. Rosalie noticed how Xavier watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, and found herself similarly stealing glances. After dessert, Xavier suddenly remembered urgent correspondence and retreated to her study, leaving Rosalie and Xavier alone. An awkward silence fell between them. Rosalie smoothed her napkin unnecessarily. "How are your cattle faring with the drought?" "Managing," he replied. "We've dug a new well that's helping." He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about those rattlers, planning to clear that nest properly before someone else comes along." "That seems dangerous," Rosalie said, concern evident in her voice. "Not if done right. I've handled worse." He studied her face. "How are you finding Aurora?" "It's different from St. Louis," she admitted. "But Aunt Alina has been wonderful and the shop keeps me occupied." Xavier nodded, twisting his hat in his hands. "I wondered if. That is, there's a social at the church next Saturday. Dancing and such. If you'd care to attend, I'd be honored to escort you." The directness of the invitation surprised and pleased her. "I'd like that very much," Rosalie replied, a warm smile spreading across her face. Relief visibly washed over him. "Good, that's good." When Alina returned, she seemed unsurprised by their plans, a knowing smile playing on her lips as she bid Xavier goodbye at the door. "A fine young man," she commented as she and Rosalie washed the dishes. "One of the few around here worth your time." Rosalie concentrated on drying a plate. "We're just attending a social, Aunt Alina." "Of course, dear," her aunt replied, not bothering to hide her smile. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Rosalie threw herself into her work, helping Alina with a rush of orders for summer hats. Yet her mind frequently drifted to thoughts of Xavier, his confident hands clearing the snakes from her path. The rare smiles that transformed his serious face. The way he'd looked at her across the dinner table. Saturday finally arrived, clear and warm. Rosalie selected her best dress, a blue cotton that brought out the color in her eyes, and allowed Alina to arrange her hair in a becoming style adorned with a small silk flower. "Perfect," Alina declared, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "You'll be the loveliest girl at the social." Xavier arrived promptly, looking handsome in a clean white shirt and dark vest. His eyes widened appreciably when he saw Rosalie, and he cleared his throat before speaking. "Miss Hammond, you look beautiful." Rosalie felt a blush warm her cheeks. "Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself." The church social was held in a meadow beside the white clapboard building. Tables laden with food lined one side, while a small band of local musicians provided lively tunes for dancing. Lanterns hung from trees, ready to illuminate the gathering once darkness fell. Xavier introduced Rosalie to those she hadn't yet met in town, his hand a steady presence at the small of her back. She noticed the appraising looks from several young women, and the nods of approval from the older folks. "You're causing quite a stir," Xavier murmured in her ear as they filled plates with fried chicken and corn pudding. "I think it's you who's causing the stir," she countered. "Mrs. Peterson just told me you haven't attended a social in over a year." Xavier looked slightly embarrassed. "Haven't had reason to." The simple statement sent warmth spreading through her chest. As evening approached, the band struck up a waltz. Xavier hesitated, then extended his hand. "Would you do me the honor?" "I'd be delighted," Rosalie replied, setting aside her plate. For such a large man, Xavier moved with surprising grace. His hand was warm and secure around hers, his other hand respectfully positioned at her waist as he guided her through the steps. "You dance well," she observed. "My mother insisted I learn," he admitted. Said no son of hers would stomp around like a newborn colt. Rosalie laughed, the sound drawing his eyes to her face. The music swelled around them, but Rosalie was increasingly aware only of Xavier, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the intensity in his gaze when their eyes met. They danced 3 consecutive dances before retreating to catch their breath. Xavier fetched them cups of lemonade, and they found a quieter spot beneath a cottonwood tree. "Tell me about St. Louis," he requested. "I've never been farther east than Kansas City." Rosalie described the bustling city, the mighty Mississippi, the grand homes and busy streets. "It's exciting," she concluded, "but also dirty and crowded. The air here is so clean it almost hurts to breathe sometimes." "And do you miss it?" Xavier asked, studying her face in the lantern light. She considered the question honestly. I miss certain things, the bookshops, the theaters. But I'm finding much to appreciate here. Her eyes met his. The people especially. A slow smile spread across his face, genuine and unguarded. I'm glad to hear that. When the social wound down, Xavier escorted Rosalie back to Aline's shop. They walked slowly, neither seeming eager for the evening to end. I enjoyed tonight, Rosalie said as they reached the door. As did I. Xavier hesitated, then gently took her hand. Miss Hammond, Rosalie, I'd very much like to call on you again. Her heart quickened at the sound of her given name on his lips. I'd like that too, Xavier. He raised her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. Good night, Rosalie. She watched him walk away, her hand still tingling from his touch. Over the following weeks, Xavier became a regular visitor. Sometimes he would bring small gifts, wildflowers, a book from his mother's collection, once a bolt of beautiful blue ribbon for Aline's hats. Other times, he simply came to sit and talk, or to escort Rosalie on walks through town. Aline observed their growing attachment with obvious approval, conveniently finding reasons to leave them alone. Young people need time to themselves, she declared when Rosalie protested her obvious matchmaking. June turned to July, and the drought worsened. Dust coated everything, and tempers frayed as crops withered and cattle grew thinner. Xavier's visits became less frequent as he worked longer hours trying to save his herd. The creek's nearly dry, he explained one evening, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. We're having to drive the cattle 5 miles to water. Rosalie listened with concern, wishing there was something she could do to help. Could you sell some of the herd? She suggested gently. Xavier's jaw tightened. Prices are rock bottom with everyone selling. I'd lose everything my father built. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. You'll find a way. I believe in you. His expression softened as he looked at her, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he raised her hand to his lips, a gesture that had become familiar but no less thrilling. Your faith means more than you know, he said quietly. The following day, a commotion in the street drew Rosalie to the shop window. A wagon had overturned in front of the mercantile, spilling barrels across the dusty road. As she watched, Xavier appeared, helping the driver right his vehicle. Rosalie smiled at the sight of him, then froze as she noticed something moving in the dust near his feet. A rattlesnake, disturbed by the commotion, had emerged from beneath the boardwalk. Without thinking, Rosalie rushed from the shop. Xavier, snake, she called, pointing frantically. He spun around, immediately spotting the danger. With swift precision, he stamped his boot near the creature, causing it to rattle in warning, then used a piece of broken barrel stave to flick it away from the gathered crowd. The snake slithered beneath the mercantile, disappearing from sight. Only then did Xavier look up, his eyes finding Rosalie's across the street. Are you all right? She asked, hurrying to his side. Fine, he assured her. But what about you? You shouldn't have rushed out like that. I couldn't just watch, she protested. What if you hadn't seen it? Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a decision made. Rosalie Hammond, he said, heedless of the onlookers, you are the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her, right there in the middle of Aurora's Main Street. His lips were warm and certain against hers, his hand gentle on her cheek. Rosalie heard a few gasps and at least one cheer, but she cared only for the man holding her. When they parted, Xavier looked momentarily stunned by his own boldness, then broke into a wide smile. I've been wanting to do that for weeks. Rosalie's heart was pounding, her cheeks flushed. I've been waiting for weeks, she admitted. He laughed. a free, joyous sound she'd never heard from him before. Taking her hand, he led her away from the curious onlookers, toward the shade of a large oak tree at the edge of town. "I know it's sudden," Xavier said once they were alone. "We've known each other barely 2 months, but I'm certain of my feelings, Rosalie. When I saw you standing there among those rattlers that first day, something in me just recognized you. I felt it too," she confessed. "Even when I was terrified, there was something about you that made me feel safe." He took both her hands in his. "I can't offer you the excitement of St. Louis. Life here is hard, especially now with the drought, but I promise to work every day to make you happy if you'll let me." Rosalie's breath caught as she realized where this was leading. "Xavier, I love you, Rosalie Hammond," he said simply. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you faced down a nest of rattlesnakes without fainting dead away." A laugh bubbled up through her tears. "And I love you, Xavier Lawson. Your strength, your kindness, the way you face each challenge without complaint." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Then will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner in everything?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "yes." Xavier rose and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally separated, they were both laughing and crying at once. "Alina will be insufferably pleased with herself," Rosalie remarked as they walked back toward town, hands intertwined. "She's been dropping hints since that first Sunday dinner," Xavier agreed with a grin. "Asked me last week if I'd considered expanding the ranch house." Rosalie groaned. "She's incorrigible." "She loves you," Xavier said. "As do I." News of their engagement spread quickly through Aurora. Alina was indeed delighted, immediately beginning plans for the wedding. "September would be lovely," she declared. "The heat will have broken by then." Life took on a dreamlike quality for Rosalie. Mornings were spent helping in the shop. Afternoons often involved wedding preparations, and evenings frequently included Xavier, who made a point of visiting despite his grueling workdays. August arrived with no relief from the drought. The creek through Aurora dried completely, forcing residents to rely solely on well water. Tensions rose as farmers lost crops and ranchers watched their herds dwindle. "Peterson's talking about selling his place," Xavier told Rosalie one evening as they sat on Alina's porch. "Moving to Denver." "Will you have to sell?" she asked, voicing the fear they'd both been avoiding. Xavier was silent for a long moment. "I've been thinking about something. The old-timers say there's a spring on the North Ridge that never runs dry, even in the worst droughts. It's on Lawson land, but it's rough country, steep, rocky, dangerous." "You're thinking of looking for it," Rosalie guessed, anxiety creeping into her voice. "Tomorrow," he confirmed. "If I can find it, run some pipes down to the lower pastures." "Let me come with you," she said suddenly. Xavier shook his head immediately. "It's too dangerous. Rattlers love those rocks and the terrain is treacherous." "I'm not as delicate as I look," Rosalie insisted, "and 2 sets of eyes would make the search faster." They debated back and forth until Xavier finally conceded, though he still looked unhappy about the idea. "We'll leave at dawn," he said. "Wear sturdy boots and bring plenty of water." Morning came with no relief from the heat. Rosalie dressed in her most practical clothes, a simple skirt and shirtwaist, and pulled on the sturdy boots she'd purchased for walking Aurora's dusty streets. She left a note for Alina, who was visiting a sick friend, explaining where they'd gone. Xavier arrived with horses, his expression grim as he assessed her outfit. "It's not too late to change your mind," he offered. "I'm coming," she said firmly, accepting his help mounting the gentle mare he'd brought for her. They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher. the landscape growing increasingly barren as they left the relatively settled areas around Aurora. The North Ridge rose before them, jagged and forbidding against the harsh blue sky. The old stories say the spring is near a formation that looks like a sleeping bear, Xavier explained as they began the ascent. Keep your eyes open for rattlers. They'll be seeking shade in this heat. The trail grew steeper, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses. Rosalie was grateful for her boots as rocks rolled beneath her feet. Sweat soaked her clothes and her throat burned despite careful sips from her canteen. There, Xavier pointed suddenly. See that outcropping? Could be what the stories described. Rosalie squinted against the sun. The rock formation did indeed resemble a sleeping bear, if one used some imagination. Let's check it out. They secured the horses in a small patch of shade and continued on foot, picking their way carefully among the rocks. Xavier insisted on going first, testing each step before allowing Rosalie to follow. The rattling sound came without warning, a dry, ominous buzz that froze them both in place. "Don't move," Xavier whispered, echoing his words from their first meeting. Rosalie held perfectly still, her eyes scanning the ground. There a large rattlesnake lay coiled in a crevice between rocks, just inches from where Xavier would have placed his next step. With deliberate slowness, Xavier reached for a long stick that lay nearby. The snake's rattle intensified as he moved. "Back up," he instructed Rosalie. "Carefully." She took one step backward, then another. The loose rocks shifted beneath her foot, and she stumbled slightly. The movement was enough to agitate the snake further. It uncoiled with lightning speed, striking toward Xavier's leg. "Xavier!" Rosalie cried out in horror, but Xavier had anticipated the strike. He jumped back while simultaneously sweeping the stick in a powerful arc, catching the snake mid-lunge and sending it tumbling down the rocky slope. Heart pounding, Rosalie rushed to his side. "Are you all right? Did it bite you?" Xavier shook his head, breathing heavily. "Missed me, but that was too close." He looked at her with concern. "We should go back. This is too dangerous." "We came for the spring," Rosalie said firmly, though her knees felt weak with relief. "Let's at least check the bare rock first." Xavier hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Stay behind me. Step exactly where I step." They continued more cautiously, Xavier using the stick to probe ahead and occasionally clear smaller rattlers from their path. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Rosalie's water was nearly gone by the time they reached the formation. "Look for any sign of moisture," Xavier instructed, scanning the ground. "Even the smallest patch of green." They separated slightly, staying within sight of each other as they searched the area. Rosalie climbed carefully around the base of the bare rock, examining every crevice. Her hope was fading when she noticed something unusual, a small, scraggly plant clinging to a crack in the stone. "Xavier, I found something growing here." He hurried to her side, excitement lighting his tired features. Together, they examined the area more closely, clearing away rocks and debris. "There!" Xavier exclaimed suddenly, pointing to a tiny trickle of water seeping from the rock face. "That's it, the spring." Working together, they cleared more rocks, revealing a small but steady flow of clear water emerging from the mountainside. "We did it," Rosalie whispered, tears of relief stinging her eyes. Xavier pulled her into a fierce embrace, heedless of their sweat-soaked clothes. "You did it," he corrected. "I would have given up." The journey back down was easier, buoyed by their success. Xavier already planning how to channel the water to his pastures. "It won't save everything," he admitted, "but it'll keep the best of the herd alive until the rains return." They were nearly back to the horses when a now familiar sound stopped them cold, the warning rattle of a snake, louder than before. "There's more than one," Xavier said quietly, scanning the ground ahead. Rosalie saw them, then at least 5 rattlesnakes, disturbed from their rest by the vibrations of approaching footsteps, now blocking their path to the horses. "We'll go around," Xavier decided, guiding Rosalie by the elbow. But as they changed direction, more rattling sounded from their left. Rosalie's blood ran cold as she realized they were surrounded, the snakes having sought shelter from the midday heat in the same rocky crevices they now needed to navigate. "Stay absolutely still," Xavier instructed, his voice tense but controlled. Slowly, he raised his stick. "When I clear a path, move quickly but carefully. Head straight for the horses." Rosalie nodded, her mouth too dry for words. With practiced efficiency, Xavier began clearing the way, using the stick to brush aside the rattlers while stamping his boots to create vibrations that drove others away. One particularly aggressive snake struck at the stick, its fangs embedding in the wood. "Now," Xavier called, having created a narrow corridor. Rosalie moved swiftly, following exactly in Xavier's footsteps as they had that first day. Her heart hammered in her chest, every rustle making her flinch. They were nearly to the horses when a rattler, hidden beneath a rock, lashed out at her ankle. Xavier's reaction was instantaneous. He shoved Rosalie forward while simultaneously bringing his boot down firmly behind her, crushing the snake's head before it could strike again. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, eyes frantically searching for any sign of a bite. "No," she gasped. "You got it in time." Relief flooded his features. "Mount up, quickly." They rode down the ridge faster than was strictly safe, neither speaking until they reached the flatter ground below. Only then did Xavier pull his horse alongside hers, reaching out to grasp her hand. "You're the bravest woman I've ever known, Rosalie Hammond." She managed a shaky smile. "I was terrified." "That's what makes it bravery," he said softly, "being afraid and doing it anyway." The sun was setting by the time they reached Aurora, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. Alina was waiting anxiously on the porch, jumping to her feet when she spotted them. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "I've been worried sick." Xavier helped Rosalie dismount, supporting her when her legs threatened to buckle from exhaustion. "My fault, Miss Alina. We were looking for the old spring on the North Ridge. And we found it," Rosalie added, mustering a tired smile. "It's small, but the water is clear and cool." Alina's anger melted into concern as she ushered them inside, insisting on examining every inch of Rosalie for snake bites, while Xavier told the story of their adventure. "You two will be the death of me," Alina declared, but pride shone in her eyes. "Now sit down and eat something before you collapse." Later, as Xavier prepared to leave, he pulled Rosalie aside. "I need to return to the ridge tomorrow with my ranch hands. We'll start work on channeling that spring." "I understand," she said, though disappointment colored her voice. He lifted her chin gently. "I was thinking, why wait until September to marry? Life's too uncertain, too precious." Her heart skipped. "What are you suggesting?" "Marry me next Sunday," he said. "A simple ceremony after church, just family and close friends." "But Aunt Alina's plans can be simplified," he finished. "Unless you want to wait." Rosalie thought of the day they'd just shared, the danger, the fear, the triumph. Life with Xavier would never be completely safe, but it would be real and meaningful. "Next Sunday sounds perfect." His smile was brilliant in the fading light. "I'll speak with Reverend Collins tomorrow." Alina took the change of plans with surprising grace, though she insisted on making Rosalie a special dress for the occasion. "Nothing elaborate," she promised. "But you'll not be married in everyday clothes." The following days passed in a blur of activity. Xavier and his men worked on the spring, successfully channeling water to the most desperate pastures. Rosalie helped Alina with the dress while continuing their regular millinery work. Word spread about the wedding, and the town rallied around them, offering flowers, food, and well wishes. Sunday dawned clear and hot, like every day that summer, but Rosalie barely noticed the heat as Alina helped her dress. The gown was simple but beautiful cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery along the modest neckline and hem. "Something borrowed," Alina said, fastening a pearl brooch at Rosalie's throat. "This was your mother's." Tears welled in Rosalie's eyes. She would have liked Xavier. She would have loved him, Alina corrected, her own eyes misting. "Because he loves you so completely." The church was filled when they arrived, the entire town having turned out for the occasion. Rosalie saw only Xavier, standing tall and handsome beside Reverend Collins, his eyes never leaving hers as she walked down the aisle on Alina's arm. They spoke their vows clearly, promising to love and cherish each other through all the challenges life might bring. When Xavier slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his mother's, he whispered Rosalie felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Collins declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Xavier's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, drawing cheers from their assembled friends. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful, with tables set up outside the church laden with food contributed by neighbors. Mrs. Finley had baked a beautiful cake and someone produced fiddles for dancing. As the sun began to set, Xavier led Rosalie to his waiting wagon. "Mrs. Lawson," he said, testing the name with evident pleasure. "Are you ready to go home?" Home. The word filled her with warmth. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." They said their goodbyes, Rosalie embracing Alina with special fierceness. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. "Be happy, my dear," Alina replied. "That's all the thanks I need." The ride to the ranch was peaceful, the evening cooling slightly as stars began appearing overhead. Xavier pointed out constellations, his arm secure around Rosalie's waist. Mrs. Finley had prepared the house beautifully, with fresh linens on the bed and wildflowers in every room. She greeted them warmly, then tactfully announced she would be staying with her sister in town for a few days, to give you young folks some privacy. Once alone, Xavier and Rosalie stood facing each other in the lamplight, suddenly shy despite the intensity of their feelings. "Welcome home," Xavier said softly, taking her hands in his. "Our home," Rosalie agreed, stepping closer. His kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that had been carefully restrained until now. Rosalie responded eagerly, all hesitation forgotten as they began their life together. The drought broke 2 weeks later. Rain fell in sheets, soaking the parched earth and bringing relief to the entire territory. Xavier and Rosalie stood on the porch of their home, watching the downpour with arms wrapped around each other. "A good omen," Xavier said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "For our future," Rosalie agreed, leaning into his embrace. Their life together was not always easy. The following years brought both joys and hardships: the birth of their first child, a son they named James, followed by twin daughters 3 years later. There were difficult winters, cattle diseases to contend with, and the occasional rattlesnake to clear from their path. But through it all, they faced each challenge together, their love deepening with each passing year. Xavier never lost his protective instincts, and Rosalie never lost her willingness to brave danger when necessary. They built the Lawson Ranch into one of the most successful in Colorado, eventually adding a wing to the house for Alina when she retired from millinery. On their 10th anniversary, Xavier took Rosalie back to the Bear Rock Spring, now properly channeled and flowing freely. A small stone marker stood nearby, inscribed with their initials and the date they'd discovered it together. 10 years ago, you showed me what true courage looks like, Xavier said, taking her hand. I've thanked God every day since for sending you into that nest of rattlers. Rosalie laughed, the sound echoing off the rocks. And I've thanked him for the stubborn cowboy who cleared the way with his boots and stick. They stood together, looking out over the land they'd nurtured and the life they'd built, secure in the knowledge that whatever rattlers might cross their path in the years to come, they would face them side by side,